have this thing in the bank so that that when you're ready to go, you got everything there and it's just an option for you. So outside of the weather, I would say Canada is pretty much we're pretty similar to the US if you start looking around the world. Like it's the US light.
Welcome to the Student Loan Podcast.
Here, you'll find practical advice on tackling student loan debt, paying down your higher education expenses,
and inspiring stories about paying off student loans. We're your hosts, Daphne Vanessa
and Shamil Rodriguez. Welcome to another episode of the Student Loan Podcast, everyone. We are excited today to bring you a different perspective on today's episode, actually one north of the border if you are listening from the US. And today we're actually going to bring Brandon Miller, who's actually going to talk about why you might want to consider going to school in Canada or becoming a Canadian citizen yourself. But either way, they'll save you costs on education. But before I get into that, I'm going to let Brandon take over, tell us a little bit about himself, and then we can take a deep dive into why Canada might be a list of options of schools you may want to consider as you're looking to go to college. All right, Brandon, turn it over to you.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Great.
Thank you for coming on. We're so excited to hear about Canada.
Awesome. Okay, so listen, my name is Brandon Miller. I'm in Toronto, Canada. I've been an immigration consultant for about 10 plus years, and I've had a number of different hats within the immigration industry. I've helped people settle in as newcomers. I obviously help people come here and get in to the country via the legal means, et cetera, et cetera. But we've been working with a lot of students, and Canada has actually grown to be a very good option for international students to come and study for a number of different reasons. So on that note, what I've done is we've structured a number of different things for students to be able to come to Canada through my immigration practice. And what we've done is we allow people and educate people on the idea of studying here, along with the immigration benefits that come with that. And the benefit to that is basically a second passport to Canada.
That is fantastic, because even with a lot of family from Canada, so apologies to my family members who are listening to this, but would have never thought about the benefits of being Canadian, even though I see so many family members who've taken advantage of a Canadian education. Can you talk to us about what are some of the nuances and differences that Canada has to offer that maybe the United States will not?
So there's a number of different reasons that somebody might want to come to Canada. Normally what I do is when people ask me that question, there's a number of different reasons, but I like to zero in on a few things, and I like to think a little bit more in terms of options for the future. So again, coming as a student, what you can do is actually you can come here, you can study, then you can work. And then after you get Canadian work experience and Canadian education, you've actually set yourself up to actually come here and get a permanent residency, which is the same as a green card, and then actually turn that into a passport, which is Canadian citizenship. If you're an American citizen, you can actually have two passports. But the biggest benefit is for people that are here. There's a number of them. So we can get in, I think we'll probably get into the cost of international fees and whatnot a little later, but it's obviously a little bit cheaper. There's a few things that I like to talk about in terms of the future, and that's worker mobility and maybe traveler mobility. So if you want to actually access different areas of the world, there's a number of different treaties in place that have worker provisions and things like that. One of the other things that comes up a lot is healthcare. We do have free healthcare here. So again, that's one of the big benefits that some people target in on, usually in their late 30s or so. Retirement benefits, there's a number of different things if, you can retire quite comfortably in Canada. And again, it just opens up access to a number of different areas of the world. And I think that that's really one of the biggest things that advantages as well.
I love that. Talk to us about Canada opening up, basically becoming more of a global citizen with that Canadian passport.
Right. So the Canadian passport, again, allows access to a number of different countries. If you're a dual passport holder, say from the US and Canada, it allows you to kind of play both sides of the fence in terms of the different treaties that are there. Now, we always hear about all these treaties and we think of them in terms of trade. But if you actually read the different areas of the treaty, there's always worker mobility provisions. So, example, Canada has a treaty with Europe, which is called the Comprehensive European Trade Agreement, or CETA. And there's worker provisions in there which allow Canadian citizens to be able to go and basically work in Europe as long as they meet, certain criteria as outlined in the different treaties. Canada has a lot of these different treaties, so it allows the person to be very global, as you put it, a global citizen, where I think that, as the world opens up and borders start to break down, it really is a benefit to be able to travel seamlessly to different areas of the world. So that's a huge benefit. And I think, going forward, we've seen the world open up, even over the last 20, 30, 40 years. I think going forward in the future, 20, 30, 40 years in the future, it's going to be even more open in that respect. So having those options, I think is certainly something that you'd want to consider.
Love. And I just want to get the obvious out of the way. Okay.
Sure.
So
Yes.
for a lot of Americans, Canada's cold. The truth is that for the majority of the year, Canada is cold. What are you going to tell us to keep us there?
So I will tell, I can answer that so well for you. And I'll tell you. So I want you to close your eyes and I want you to think about this. You've done a long bit of a winter, it's cold. And then I'll tell you, the first day of spring is probably the best time of the year. Really what it is you actually be able to go. It's getting warm enough that you get to roll down the windows a little bit. You see people, they get their bikes out and they're starting to ride around. Somebody's got some music blaring out the window. And I'll tell you what, I appreciate the summer so much more. So I know I lived in the Philippines for 8 years and I lived
Oh,
and
amazing.
right.
Why did
So
you leave?
well, I'll tell you one thing that I noticed about living in the tropics for so long is I had no concept of time.
Oh,
And
yes.
you went from hot to like rainy to hot to rainy.
Mm.
And I was actually like, here we've got 4 seasons, but I'll tell you what, I actually appreciate winter so much more. And I know
Wow.
that sounds really strange, but
It does.
I know it does. I know it totally does. But like, look, I love to ski. I love the different things that you can do here with winter. And I'll tell you what, we really love our summers.
Mhm.
And again, because we get it for, it's warming up a little bit. So we get a good 4 to 5 to 6 months of really nice weather. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It's funny because I have a number of clients from the Middle East as well and they're always like, "Oh, it's so cold." I'm like, as somebody who I lived in the Middle East as well. I was in Kuwait for a little bit,
Oh,
and
nice. My brother was there.
yeah, and it's hot. I know what 50 degrees out in the desert feels like, and I'll tell
Yeah.
you what, but I didn't actually have to sit there and stay in the desert. I was sitting in like an uber like air conditioned place looking at it and seeing the heat waft off the sand and going, really hot out there today. Well, I'm gonna have a coffee. It's the same thing in the winter here, right? We
Yeah.
literally go from like warm house. I hit the car starter, car warms up, go hit that, and then into the office. It's great.
Yeah, and you guys are set up for that too, right? So I remember some family members where the Canadian government requires you to have certain tires and those have to
Right.
be inspected
Right.
and for the United States that's not a requirement. So
Right.
those are some things that the further north you go, the more governments are well equipped to handle that type of weather. So
Yeah.
just so
Yeah.
people know.
They actually get an insurance discount if you've got snow tires on your car. So it's great. So a lot of
Oh,
people just
nice.
put it on just for that.
Oh,
But
nice.
yeah, it's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, it's gonna take me a little bit of convincing if I have to ever move to a place where they got to put metal on my tires to make sure that I've got traction. But
Yeah.
we've got that here too in the States, so I can imagine what that's like. But I do want to ask Brendan on that front. I know we joke about it, but what have you seen so far in terms of trends of people that are actually taking this route? I know you have some younger people that are going to school. And what about some young professionals too? I mean, what have you seen so far?
So a number of different people will come here for various reasons, but a lot of times it's a stepping stone to a larger future in terms of having the passport and things like that. Just as you asked me that, I was thinking about one of my clients. They were from Cleveland and they had finished up school and they decided to come up here because they wanted to get their passport. They enrolled in a post grad. So it was a young couple, and they enrolled in a post grad diploma course here. One person went to school and the other person actually worked in IT and was continuing to work at their job. And they were doing it very strategically to be able to come and get the passport. And a lot of times people are thinking ahead. And they're looking at it so that they're like, yeah, I'm going to come up, I'm going to go get my passport, I'm going to hang out for a couple of years, be finished there. And then after that, there's no residency requirements. They can get up and go and then come back in 20, 30 years. Or if they want, they can pass on citizenship to their children or their grandchildren or things like that. I had another guy is looking at it. He's from just outside of Chicago, and he wasn't really interested in it for himself as much, but he was thinking about the future for his children or his grandchildren and having the different options and using it that way. So I hear that quite a bit, and I think that that's actually a big trend for people, that people are looking and they're saying, you know what? I actually don't know what the world's going to look like in 20, 30 years, but I'm kind of hedging my bets, and I think I'm going to have another option that's available. Maybe not only for myself and maybe my retirement years, but also, for my kids or my grandkids or something along those lines. So I think it's very prudent in that respect. And I always respect people that think that far in advance. I've had some pretty amazing conversations with people over the years, and just the level of thinking and foresight is just remarkable.
No, I'd have to agree completely. I think that being able to look at your future in that way, especially when you're thinking about your schooling costs and things like that, all of those things are a part of, a time of your life when you should be planning, 20, 30, 40 years out into the future, essentially into your retirement years, if you take, the traditional path. What I find there that I thought was really intriguing is that one, I was ignorant to the fact, this is for a long time ago, when I went to college, I didn't know that you could have dual passports and be an American citizen, right? So that was one thing that I always found intriguing. And then two, the idea that the cost of education is so much cheaper, right? Like, can you just emphasize, we are on the Student Loan Podcast. I mean,
Mhm.
how much do student loans really play a role in financing your education, or is it so affordable that people can actually work and pay it off so they graduate debt free?
So people can actually work and pay it off and graduate debt free. Now they're not going to retire on that,
Sure.
but they could, if you really worked. Like, I'll give you an example, and again, I know it's a bit dated, but I think it's relative. I actually went to school. I had very small student loans. Like, I think I had when I finished about $10,000 in student loans, which is nothing.
Hmm.
I worked going to school the whole time. Now you got to understand, minimum wage here is about $14 an hour, 14.25 in Toronto. So, you know, bottom job that you're going to get is still going to be 14.25 an hour. So, if you look at doing the math and you're going to school and you're paying for that as an international student, you can work and go to school at the same time for 20 hours. And then you can work full time during the breaks. And then you actually get a postgraduate work permit to work after that. So a lot of people, once you pay the tuition. Now, just to give you an idea, local tuition, for instance, if you're going to go to a college here, a community college, is anywhere from three to $5,000. For an international student, it's about $12,000 to $15,000, and that's Canadian. So, I think the Canadian dollar is sitting at about 80 cents or so to the US dollar now. So it's about $1.20 US that you'll get for every dollar that you spend. So it's quite affordable. Books and living expenses are all part of it in terms of housing and whatnot. But you can do okay. Now, if you put that into perspective, even at the international rates, you're still doing okay. I think 12,000 Canadians, about 9,000 US for tuition in that respect. Yeah. So yeah.
No,
And,
it's a great point. Go ahead, keep going, Brandon.
no, and I was going to say that some of my American students as well, they'll get loans in the States to be able to pay for their education up here. So when you look at it, then you're not saddled with the huge amount of debt, and you're also setting yourself up for a future opportunity. One of the things that I wanted to speak about, because you reminded me there when you were talking about setting up for the future, is you mentioned something where people need to plan. I would say the age demographic that I tend to get is generally around 37 to 39. People generally really start contacting me and really start exploring it. And I struggled with why that is for so long, because I kept saying, I'm like, oh man, if I could just speak to people in their 20s and let them know that they have this opportunity, I wouldn't have to keep having this conversation. And I'll tell you what, somebody pointed it out to me and they said, oh, that makes sense. They said, when you're about 38, 39, you're kind of you're maxing out your earning potential and you're looking ahead to retirement, and you're starting to do the math and figure things out. And that's when, you're like, healthcare, retirement benefits, all of these things start to come in. So I like to actually speak to people early and say, hey, listen, get this all, have this thing in the bank so that, that when you're ready to go, you got everything there and it's just an option for you. So outside of the weather, I would say Canada is pretty much we're pretty similar to the US. If you start looking around the world, like it's the US light, I guess we're like cousins, right?
The US
So,
nice.
yeah.
Much nicer.
Yeah.
No, I like that. I will bring up a quick side note here. There was a friend of mine in high school that actually taught me about McGill, and I had brought that up pre-show and I always bring it up as an example because he actually knew this in high school, that he wanted to go to school in Canada because he wanted to save on the expenses of going to school, and he wanted to actually broaden his market. Like, I'm not joking whatsoever. Now, do I know if he actually went and did that? No, I have no idea. But
Yeah.
I love the idea that, like, it's so true that most people weren't thinking about it, and it was just somebody that I'd met that really was like, no, this is my plan. Like, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We're hearing it more. I'm really seeing it more and more, and it's becoming. I think it's the beginning of a trend. There's a good chunk of people that come here every year, but we're seeing a lot more of an uptake in it because people are realizing, they're like, hey, this is actually a cheaper option, and oh, and by the way, I can set this up and I can get this benefit and all of those different things. I'll give you another example, and this would speak to your younger audience. We have different articulation agreements with a number of different countries. So, for instance, we have the working holiday programs, and Canada signed on to a number of different treaties with that. So, for instance, if I wanted to go, if I was under 35, I had a Canadian passport, I can literally fill in an application and get like an open work visa to go work in Australia, for instance, or Spain, or whatever. There's a number of different countries that, in terms of mobility. So, again, getting back to it, I really just think it opens up a whole host of options. So yeah, your friend's on it. He was ahead of it, I think, because I really think it's it's been something that a small number of people have been doing, but we're definitely seeing a growing number of people investigating this a lot further.
Oh, well said. Well said. And I have to admit, I have to admit that the first country that you might appreciate this, Brandon, the first country that I got my passport stamped by was actually Canada. So
Fantastic.
yeah,
Where'd you
yeah.
go? Which part of Canada?
We went to Montreal, and Daphne was actually the one that encouraged me and got me to apply to get my passport in the first place because all my traveling was in country at that point.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Montreal's, you know what? I'll tell you, Montreal's a really popular place. Like when I speak to Americans, they're all like, yeah, I really want to go to Montreal. I'm like, awesome.
Yeah.
Montreal's a great city. I'm sure you had a great time.
Oh no, absolutely had a blast. I'm looking forward to going to Toronto at some point in the future. But definitely had that experience and loved Canada. It was a really great time. I actually encourage a lot of people to go and visit.
Well,
In the
as
summer.
yeah, in the summer, right?
I'm
In
sorry.
the
I'm
summer.
giving you a hard time because
Good point.
I grew up going to Canada. I have a lot of family there. My grandparents lived there. So I'm making fun of you, but it's all in good jest because I do love Canada. I'm just
That's
being funny.
It's fun. The winter is great as long as you're indoors next to a fire, right?
I
Exactly.
like
It's
that.
beautiful. It's
I remember
beautiful.
just having all these plans and then I land and I get there and I'm like, nope, it's too cold. We're staying right
It's
here and
too
playing
cold.
Monopoly. We're playing Monopoly.
That's
Yes.
it. But I'll tell you what, you appreciate it. You really do, because you're inside and you're like, oh, it's so nice and cozy in here. And it's like Monopoly. I'm like, yeah, winter's beautiful. Look at all that snow out there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No,
So
there's certainly benefits. What I'd love to talk about are two things. One,
mhm.
let's get into the numbers.
Okay.
So I looked up McGill and I noticed that for an international tuition,
Hmm.
you're looking at about 26,000 Canadian
Hmm.
for tuition for a bachelor's of arts. And that is pretty inexpensive compared to a United States private school.
And I'm going to tell you right now, McGill. So McGill, Queens, McGill and Queens are the first ones that come to mind. U of
UBC.
T and UBC, right?
Hmm.
Those are some of the top schools. So
Absolutely.
McGill is definitely the top end school, and that would be the top end tuition. When you start looking at some other schools, it's
Mhm.
it's quite a bit cheaper.
Yeah.
So at 26K Canadian.
For a
Um,
bachelor's of arts, though. So if you are going for, a higher degree, it's more expensive, I noticed.
Of course, yes. Yeah, master's degrees would be a little bit more. But
Mhm.
26K Canadian, I think would probably be about 21 US, I think, somewhere in
Hmm.
there. So, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's where you'd be at.
Less than a semester of law school.
Right.
Well, it
Right.
depends on where you go. Hey, Daphne, I have
Right,
to
right. True,
pray for
true.
myself. I went to a state law school, and that was
Yeah.
much better,
Oh,
much closer to the Canadian rates. I have to. I
okay.
can't. I can't poo-poo on all the schools here because
That's true.
it definitely was a great financial decision compared to other law schools here in the states.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's more comparable to the public education in the United States rather than the private education.
Yeah, I know. I don't know a ton about the rates, but I do know that the private rates are quite a bit more than the public rates for sure.
So back into that, then I guess what are I mean we're I think that was a really good comparison that Daphne brought up, right? Comparing going to school in Canada can be comparable depending on which state you live in, which programs are available there, right? You can be a really thrifty shopper here in the U.S. and get away with saving money on going to school, right? Let's say you go to community college for a couple 2 years, then you go for the last 2 years to your school, top choice or whatever the case may be. You end up saving a lot there because you're taking all those core classes and you're getting them knocked out of the way. But what about some of the other items? Because let's say we've got somebody in the audience who's listening right now and is like, you know what, Canada is a good choice. Let me explore that more. But Brandon, let's make sure that we're not like everything is like a Disney fairy tale at this point, right? Let's make sure we at least give them the idea of like what they should keep in mind, like what should be in their tool bag as they start to explore and do research on like, hey, what are some other things that I should keep in mind as I actually look at possibly going to Canada to go to school.
I think, as with anything, if you're going to go to school, you need to have a plan. So, for instance, if somebody comes to me and they say, you know what, I'm really just interested to put a leg up so that I can immigrate to Canada and do that, and I'm interested in the passport, I'm like, fantastic. Figure out if you need a 1 year, 2 year program. Get into it as quickly as you can, and get in and get out unscathed. People will come to me and they'll say, hey, listen, I want to go to graduate school. I was like, okay, you can do that. Or you can get your PR, become a permanent resident here, and you're going to pay like a fourth of the tuition. The international, Daphne, I don't know if you looked at the local domestic rates for McGill when you were
Oh,
looking at the international,
$2,000, like nothing.
right? So
Wow.
So basically, you could actually go and you could have, instead of paying like the 25,000, you could maybe go and do a college course, which would be on the lower end of the tuition, which would be about 9,000 a year, get your permanent residency, and then be like, okay, I'm going to go to grad school. Oh, and by the way, there's a number of different programs that will give me loans that are really subsidized, or grants. And they're not just like, the fake, I call it like the fake grant, where it's like, yeah, it's a fake grant because our tuition's like way through the roof. So we're actually subsidizing it to where it should be. Um, I don't know. But no, it's basically being strategic. So think about what your purpose is. Some people will come. I had a guy from Brazil a little while ago, and he says, listen, I want to go to this program. And I said, well, what do you want to do? You get a Canadian passport? He's like, nah, I don't really care about that. I've got a really lucrative land development business all over like South America and into Central America. I'm just trying to make contacts through this master's program so I can actually fuel my business. I was like, okay, well, he's comes with a plan, right? He's identified his program. He knows what he wants to do, and he's in and out. There's a number of different considerations. So there's the economic. There's also, if you want to put that aside, then there's like, well, what am I doing here? What's this study going to lead to? What does the jobs look like? Can I use this? Is it portable for a number of different industries? There's some very good programs here that you can use to actually go back. Like for instance, Sheridan College is a good example. They have an animation program. Pixar, Disney, they hire right out of that program, and basically go. The computer animation is bar none. So my cousin's a great example of that. He's well, I don't want to name drop, but he's living in California working for a thing, and he was recruited through his work, and he was out of that program. So there's a number of different things if you understand the different programs that are available. But I think it all boils down to the person and what their goal is. Again, if it's purely strategic in terms of getting the passport, then fine, think like that. But look at something that you can add to your repertoire. One of the things that's popular for people is they'll have graduate studies, et cetera, et cetera. They'll come in here and they'll do like an 8-month program in project management, for instance. They'll get their project management certification, which is portable anywhere, usually within a number of different Western countries. But at the same time, they'll use that as a stepping stone to the passport, but they'll also bolster their resume in that respect and get that certification. So that's a good one. Yeah.
You can see that as almost like a win-win, like getting those two birds, boosting your resume, but then also getting one step closer to your goal.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me ask you this question then, Brandon, because I want to dissect some of these, like what I would consider common questions that you might have.
Sure.
If you're looking at this for somebody that may be like, you know what, I didn't think about this. Permanent resident. It sounds permanent. So can you let's just debunk some of those things for people, just so they know, like, do I have to live here forever? Right? Let's do some of those types of questions.
Okay. So a permanent resident, there's a difference between a permanent resident and a citizen. The biggest difference is that a permanent resident can do everything that a citizen can do here in Canada, except vote or join the military or some other sensitive jobs, for instance. Now, with that said, it's basically even keel, except a permanent resident. One of my clients put it the best: you're like a permanent guest. So, for instance,
like
right? I thought that was a fantastic comparison. It sounds permanent, but in actual fact, if you're if you get in trouble, for instance, right, you can actually become criminally inadmissible. And then, as soon as you do whatever you got to do with that, they're going to say, okay, well, thank you for being here. You're criminally admissible. We're going to show you the door. If you're a citizen, I always joke with my clients. I'm like, great, you're a citizen. You can murder now and you're not going to get deported. But all serious, don't murder anybody, folks.
Legal disclaimer for all the listeners.
That's it, right? Yeah. Put that in the show notes. No, but seriously, people, people, once you get your passport, it's very difficult to lose that. As a permanent resident, it's the same as being a green card holder. It's a little less onerous if you're familiar with the things, some of the requirements that you have to meet with the green card. It's a little less onerous here in that you have to have residency 2 out of 5 years. But for instance, some people will come, they'll land, they'll hang out for a month, and then they can disappear for like 2.5 years and come back and complete their residency requirements, as an example. So, in some places in the world, to maintain the permanent residence, you really have to be in the country. If you're leaving, you have to make entry, usually sometimes for 6 months at a time. You don't have to do that in Canada. You can kind of come and go. But if you're here, you get your passport, then all of that kind of goes out the window. You can get your passport and you can disappear for 40 years and be like, yeah, I'll go back to Canada. Right.
Nice.
Or, yeah.
So you can essentially use the Canadian passport to get access to European owned beaches around the world.
If you're strategic about it, yes, you could.
Interesting.
Yes, you could.
That's interesting.
Trying to tie back to the weather for my people who are afraid of the snow, just
Yep.
helping you out.
Or Australian beaches for that matter.
That's true.
That's true.
Yeah.
Good point. You know what? And I know we touched on this earlier, but I just want to emphasize this, especially for people that are either seniors or juniors in college and looking to go to grad school. I think it really is important to like consider this option, especially if you're in a field, especially after the pandemic, if you're in a field that travels well in terms of mobility and being able to work remotely, because why not travel? Why not be in Canada during the winter if that's what you like? Why not be on the beaches of Australia or on the coasts in Western Europe or, whatever you want to do. My point is that I think it's great to look at these options because now you've basically unlocked a greater portion of the world that will allow for you to come and go as freely as you might be used to doing in the States right now. But if you don't and you just have your US passport, it's just a couple extra steps, but it's a couple extra steps that you may not have to worry about later in the future. So I think that's like a really good point to emphasize, that you're unlocking a different market.
Can I dive into that really quickly? 'Cause
Absolutely.
You brought up a really good point. I've seen over the last year and a half or so, a lot of people working from home and whatnot, their jobs are portable. And I have more American clients than I've had I've been doing this for over 10 years now. And I'll tell you, at no time in the time that I've been doing this, have I worked with so many Americans that have, they're, basically future hedging their options, if you will. But what's interesting to me is this, and this is part of what I preach in terms of when you come here, you got to do your planning. And one of the things, Canada is a very big and diverse place. And I always challenge people. I'm like, okay, name 5 cities. And I know that, you guys can do that. But then I say, name 10 or name 15. And people generally fall off at that point. There's so many great places for you to actually come and stay. And you can actually design your lifestyle around it. Now, I'll give you an example. There's a place in the East Kootenays called Kimberley, very small town. It's called like the Bavaria of Canada. It looks like like a beautiful German town, right? It's got all these nice buildings. It's in the mountains. It's nestled to ski resorts and golf courses and just everything. About 20 to 30 minutes away, there's an airport there called in Cranbrook, and you can actually hop on a plane or you could drive. You're about an hour and a half away from Spokane, Washington, and you can drive down to the border, do whatever you want, or you can hop a plane and you can go. Now, a lot of people, it's funny, I have a friend that lives there and he was bringing this up. There's a lot of doctors that have come out of the US and they're there. And he says, oh yeah, he was talking about the healthcare in there. And I said, oh, how's we were talking just in thing. He's like, man, our hospital really punches above its weight here because we've got all these people, they want to be a doctor, but yet they want to be next to world-class skiing. So they've actually designed their life around that. Right. So, and then they can hop on a plane. He's like, yeah, in town, we've got pilots that work for Cathay Pacific, or they're flying over to Hong Kong and they just sit and they want to be in the mountains. So they've designed their life around different little nooks. And I think that that's actually really brilliant. I've got a number of people from the States right now that are doing exactly that. I have people that are, psychotherapists, for instance, and their practices have moved all online. So they're like, why not? We're getting paid in the US dollars and we're sitting
Absolutely.
in Canada. It's a comfortable lifestyle. And you know what? If we want to drive back or fly back, we're home in an hour, 2 hours. It's no big deal. The other thing is too, is most major cities, here's a fun fact for you. Most major cities are next to the US border, and 80% of the Canadian population lives within 200 kilometers of the US border. So again, getting back to the coldness of it, we're not like up in the Arctic Circle there. Most 80% of the population is straddling, the 49th parallel. So, you can imagine that it's pretty easy to access a lot of that.
I slightly agree with you, but I'm I'm going to have to push back a little bit because not very many people live I can speak for New York, for example, at that top part of New York. The
That's true.
population's at the bottom of New York. So even though New York technically is near Canada, I think 5 people live there. Sorry.
Oh, boo.
No, really, I like population wise, census data wise,
No, I
that
get it. I get it.
MSA has a very low population.
I forgot to mention, Brandon,
So,
that Daphne is the most beach person, sun person that I know. So this is going to
yes.
be a tough episode for her either way.
Yes, it is. I've done skiing and all that stuff, and I'll probably do it again,
There's
but
some great beaches in Canada. Actually, to be
yes.
honest, there's on the West Coast. I'm really excited. I have an immigration conference that I have to hit in October, but I'm going to stay out for an extra week and I'm going to go to the most western beach in Canada in Tofino. Go take a look. Like fantastic surfing, the whole deal, orcas, like everything.
Really?
So, oh
Does the
yeah.
water ever get warm?
Well, that's so there you go. That's the trick, right? The water, right? There's beautiful beaches out in PEI too, right? But it's cold. It's really
Right.
cold.
I'm gonna
No,
say
so
The Hamptons is beautiful, but it's warm for 2 seconds and
That's
then it
it,
gets
right?
cold again. But so speaking about positive parts about Canada, let's talk about the Gulf Islands. So there are islands in Canada that have a beach feel, or I'd say more of like a Hamptons feel, like Martha's Vineyard. It's not like a tropical beach feel, but it's maybe like the northeastern type of feel. That's got to be exciting, right? How long do people hang out in those areas since summer isn't as long?
A lot of times, like if you look at Vancouver, for instance,
Mhm.
it doesn't really snow in Vancouver. So
Mm.
if you really want to stay away from the snow, Vancouver. Now you can actually literally be at the beach down at there's a beautiful beach at English Bay. You could be there and you could be skiing in the afternoon or skiing in the morning and at the beach in the afternoon. So you've got that. If you're really afraid of the weather, look at that. I would not suggest, central Canada. Obviously that's no fun.
Manitoba?
Right.
No.
Yeah. Or Winnipeg, we call it winter peg.
Winterpeg.
Right.
So true.
That's so cool.
Ice.
I'll tell you what, it was funny. I was at a conference in the Philippines about 10, 15 years ago, and the immigration minister was there. And he's like, Filipinos are so resilient. He's like, we have 50 nurses from Mindanao, which is the southern half of the Philippines, like very tropical. And they're going to Nunavut, which is the Arctic Circle. And I was just, that you should have seen the smile on my face. I'm like, oh my gosh, do they know what they've just signed up for?
No, they don't.
I couldn't even imagine. I'm like, well, here's your bear spray. But yeah, no, you can escape a lot of the cold if you really want to. I would say go to Western Canada. You'll do okay if you're in that area. But out east, it gets pretty cold. Definitely very cold and stormy, for sure. And Toronto, we have winters that are really harsh, and we have winters that are not so harsh. So
yeah. And it's all perspective too, right? It took me
exactly
so many years. For years, I couldn't even do a winter in New York. And then many years later, I don't want to say how many years because that will age me, I started to get used to it. And I was shocked that my body had accepted winter.
You know what though? I'm not a doctor, but there's some science to that. I
I'm
was told
sure.
your blood actually thickens up in the cold. In the
Mm,
cold, it takes a little while for it.
mhm.
And please, if anyone's listening to this, don't be like, "Oh, guy doesn't know what he's talking about." That's what I was told because I moved back. When I moved back, I was in the Philippines for 8 years, and I moved back
Oh,
here.
beautiful.
And I was cold, man. I was cold. I was like, oh, it's so cold here. And people are like, what are you talking about? This is t-shirt weather. I'm like, I'm freezing. But somebody told me that. They're like, yeah, your blood thickens up. That's what it is. Takes a couple of years to get used to it. I'm like, okay,
Oh my
sure.
goodness.
So
I don't
there
know
you
about you
go.
guys. For me, every winter is always a harsh winter. I don't care what it's like.
It's true. It's true.
Some case studies of people. I think there is one celebrity, a personality, if you will, that leveraged this strategy that you're talking about, and we have not mentioned him yet. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I don't.
Elon Musk. So
Oh,
Elon
yes.
Musk
Yes.
came
Yeah.
to Canada.
I didn't even know where
Mhm.
Daphne was going with that one.
I do know that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So Elon Musk leveraged Canada to
Mhm.
eventually become I guess, create American companies, if you will, Tesla. But
Mhm. Yep.
so to eventually become, the entrepreneur that he is today. So he went from South Africa
Yep.
to Canada and then from Canada to the US. So it just shows you how Canada opens up doors for you if you're from a country where maybe the doors weren't as open before. And I love that
Mhm.
inclusivity that Canada has for all different people. I think that's a
Mhm.
beautiful thing. One more
Mhm.
story that I have about Canada is that Canada was actually instrumental in encouraging immigration from Haiti to Canada at the
Mhm.
time in the early 1900s, I want to say. And all the history people can correct me on dates, but a long time ago before our lifetimes,
Mhm.
there Canada had a need of medical professionals. And so they went to other French speaking countries, the closest of which happened to be Haiti, to find in Quebec specifically doctors, nurses, because they were at a shortage. And so that explains the heavy population of medical professionals from that country. So I just thought that was a cool fact to mention.
Yeah, it's a great fact. And one of our governor generals was actually from Haiti. I don't know if you knew
Mhm.
that.
Yes, I remember.
Yeah. So it's funny. There was something else that I was reading, and it was you talk about the inclusiveness of Canada. We have a parliament, so we have a House of Commons and there's a Senate. And in the House of Commons, which would be similar to the Congress, I think there's about three. I can't remember. I think it's 342 seats.
Mhm.
But in the current government, they were talking about first generation people that made up the government, and it was over 50 people in the government, and I think there was 6 or 8 that were actually cabinet ministers. And you
Mm.
think about it, one of our old immigration ministers was a Somali refugee,
Yeah.
Ahmed
Wow.
Ahmed Hussein,
Oh my
and
goodness.
he literally came here as a refugee, first generation, and he made his way up into the government, not only to the government but to a cabinet position where he was
Wow.
head of immigration. So I really think that that's something special, where you can look at that, and we really do celebrate the diversity in that, and there are options that are open. People need to understand how to tap into them, and that's why I'm all
Yeah.
about educating people on some of the benefits that are here, because I just think it's a wonderful thing. So
Mhm.
we have a lot of connections around the world, as does the U.S. But it's beautiful that we can actually put those things together. And thank you for bringing that up. I love that. I love
Yeah,
it.
no, I've appreciated some of but many of Canada's international relations because they really do make it a point to be inclusive and not only with people like Michael Jean, but also just generally in how they operate with bilateral treaties. So
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah,
Awesome.
it's a
No, I
very
think
interesting conversation. Go ahead, Shamil.
Awesome.
no, I think that was very well said. I mean, this episode really does emphasize and like stress the I guess the U.S. perspective of considering Canada. but we do have listeners overseas. So, if you are listening, Canada, the Elon Musk example was a great one. Look at Canada in the reverse, and looking like if you're looking at, living in Canada or living in Canada and also doing business in the U.S., right? These treaties work both ways. And Canada is a great country that has done a great
Mhm.
job, in my perspective, of maintaining great diplomatic relations with the world. That's how I kind of view it.
Well, I'll tell you, that's a really good point because, NAFTA or CUSMA or USMCA, I don't even think with the new treaty, we know what it's called anymore. It's different depending on the country you're in. Let's just call it the old NAFTA or the new NAFTA.
Yeah,
The new
There's literally, you talk about that with Elon Musk, like South Africa to Saskatchewan of all places, and then
Mhm.
basically leverage that ability to be able to come into the US.
Yeah.
A lot of people, if they want to go to the US, I'm like, listen, you can do that, but you take somebody from, say, and I'm not even going to start talking about U.S. immigration, but it confuses me actually. So
It's not easy.
everything starts with an I and all
It
these different
does.
forms, right? It's very confusing. People ask me questions, about this. I'm like, no, Canada. That's me. But what happens is a lot of my understanding is that, if somebody's coming in from a country, there's priority processing lists. So for instance, if you're coming in from India or China or some of the high migration countries of the world, you've got a long line to be able to access that until your
Absolutely.
number's called, right?
Yep. Mhm.
So if you look at that, you could actually you could be like, okay, I'm going to go to Canada with the eventual idea that, yeah, I want to start this business in the United States. Okay, come to Canada, get your passport, and then you can do, an intercompany transfer. You can get an L1, different visas, and be able to go and transition yourself into the States, similar to your example of what Elon Musk did, right? There's a
Right.
lot of opportunity for that. So if people are overseas, again, thinking very strategic, putting together a plan. I'm all about plans. Part of what I did with Second Passport is tell people you have to have a plan, you have to be able to implement it, and then you have to think about what your settlement looks like. And I think that's the biggest thing. So
Love. Love. Well, I have one last piece that I think the audience might appreciate. So, a lot of students, yes, are coming straight from secondary school, but some students have families. And for those students that have families, can you talk a little bit about what childcare is like at the various phases of considering becoming a Canadian citizen? So, what is it like as a resident? And then what is it like when you eventually become a Canadian citizen?
what you'll find, now speaking in general terms, if somebody comes here and they have a family and they want to study, they can actually arrive, come and get the student permit, and then their spouse, if they have a spouse, and the spouse wants to come with them, is entitled to an open work permit, which means they can go work as much as they want and do whatever they want. And if they have children, then the children will also be granted study permits so that they can come with their parents and be able to study at the same time. Childcare, funny you should bring that up because I'm not psychic, but I think that there's going to be an election soon. And one of the paramount issues is a national childcare plan that they want to put in place. It's been on the table for a long time. As you know, we have a national healthcare plan, and now they're actually putting in a national childcare plan. I know that you've brought up McGill and Montreal. We've talked about Quebec a few times. Quebec is a great example of really, really subsidized and affordable childcare.
Right.
I don't know if you're aware of that or not, but they really like it's. I think it works out to like $10 a day or something after all
Oh,
the
wow.
subsidies kick in. it's like nothing. And the idea is that, you know, they want more people working. They want people to be able to have access to that because it's limiting.
Yeah.
And they want people to be able to work and be able to do that and also access quality childcare. So it's going to be interesting to see what that looks like. If somebody's coming and they want access to childcare, there's private childcare, there's public childcare already existing. And there's also a number of different subsidies that will come with that too, depending on income level. So you can literally go in and say, look, I need this. You can get into a number of different childcare options. And if you're not making, you know, great money, or you're making a modest salary, you can apply for that, and they'll give you a subsidy. So
That's
it actually
insane.
is very, very affordable.
It's
So
insane. But there are income limits though, right? Or like if you're an entrepreneur, you own your own business, what are the limits like for people who probably make quote too much money? The doctors, the lawyers, those people.
so normally, if at the top end of it for private childcare, you're at about $2,000 a month for private. That would be the top end of it. You know, and 2,000 Canadian. But if you're on subsidized childcare, it's probably about $500-600 a month, and the quality is great. It's just that the government kicks in the balance to be able to do that. Again, you use the option or the idea of an entrepreneur. I think you have a lot of flexibility in that because, you know, some entrepreneurs, you know, pay themselves not a lot of money.
Right.
Right. So there's different ways that you can actually go and look at that. And that's a conversation to have with a tax professional. But a lot of people, there's a number of different benefits in that. And childcare, I think, we're seeing the beginning of that now. And I think that that'll be something a lot of people are in agreement on that. So they're just trying to figure out how they're going to do it and who's going to pay for it. There's no conversations going on that, you know, this is a bad idea, right? Everyone agrees that it's a good idea. They're just trying to, you know, devil's in the details. They're trying to figure out the logistics of it. So,
Wow.
yeah, it's great. I think it's great.
Congratulations, Canada. The
Yeah.
United States is not there yet, but
Slow clap for Canada on
congratulations to
that one, yeah.
Canada.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a number of different benefits like that. You know, even the mat leaves too, right? Like if you look at that, that's
Oh, do not even get me started.
yeah.
You guys, is 1 year. And I have people that I know in Canada who are talking about why it's not 2 years. And
Yeah.
I almost fell out of my chair because we only get 3.5 months or something like that. And we're lucky.
It's 1 year, and you can actually split that up between the father and the mother.
That's crazy.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
free. That way, just so
That
the audience
honestly
knows,
sounds like vacation to me.
well, just so that we know, the audience knows when they say mat leave, they're talking about maternity leave, right? Let's just make
Sorry.
sure we leave our audience in the dust.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Sure. Sorry.
Maternity leave.
No, but it's a great distinction here, guys, right? Like not everyone is just an undergraduate going to school. We have a lot of listeners actually that are in
Mhm.
their grad school programs, and we have a ton of them, actually, a broad section of them have children as well. So if you're looking at that, I mean, imagining private school education for your child, or private, to say childcare, excuse me, rather, childcare is, you know, top end is 2,000 Canadian, and then, you know, possibility of having a fully funded program, you know, countrywide. That changes the game. And then maternity leave, that would be 1 year. You know, people asking why it can't be 2. Oh, come on. I mean, I won't even get into that. I mean, there wasn't.
1 year of maternity leave, and I would have worked at wherever for the rest of my life. That would have given me loyalty. Like I can't even imagine getting 1 year of paid maternity leave. This sounds to me like a vacation because in
It's-
America we get so little time. You go back to work and you're still in pain, and it's normal here.
Yeah, no, it's that's there, and that's government sponsored, and the government rolls that out. So now we're going for the
crazy.
childcare, which is great. Yeah, it's fantastic. I really do appreciate having the access to those things. And again, for people that do have families and whatnot, that changes the calculations a lot. I deal with a number of people that are well into their 30s, into their 40s. My oldest student that I brought to Canada was 52.
Oh, cute. That's so
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
awesome.
So a number of people are doing that. But again, a lot of people in their 30s are looking at it for because it actually does increase their points quite a bit to be able to come here. And I also let people know, I'm like, you know what? Be a little bit strategic in it too, because it's actually, you could use education as a great way to settle in. For instance, you could actually find a program that has an internship, and be able to use that to be able to get your first job or settle in or get that work experience that you need to be able to do that. So again, ton of options with that, ton of options.
I love it. I love it. This was a great episode, Brandon. I'm so happy that we brought this different perspective today. I think this was a great topic to go into, and just a different angle to consider. Right here at the Student Loan Podcast, we do cover a lot of different topics about student loans specifically, but then also, the costs of going to school and how to reduce those if possible. But this wasn't just a money saving episode. I think this was more of a broadening your horizons episode. And so, Brandon, I really appreciate you bringing that knowledge to the show today. Is there anywhere in particular that you want our listeners, that they're looking to reach out to you or want to ask you more detailed questions?
You know what? My mission for today was basically to come on here and just, if I even reach one person and I'm able to change, their life or give them opportunity for the future, that's a win for me. I don't have, go to this website and fill this in and I'll spam you and do all of that stuff. I've just said to people, I'm like, listen, if you're truly interested, reach out to me. My email is brandon@mysecondpassport.ca. I wrote a book called Second Passport. And if people contact me and they say, hey, I heard you speaking to Davni and Shabil there, and, I would really love a copy of your book and I'd like to look at coming to Canada. Great. Let me know why you want to come and I'll send you a copy of that so you don't have to pay Amazon. And, and we can have a conversation. But just drop me an email, and no, it doesn't go into some mail list or to some virtual assistant somewhere. It comes directly to me. And I just love talking to people about, the opportunity of coming to Canada. So Brandon@mysecondpassport.ca, drop me an email and I'll hook you up.
All right, sounds like a plan. Daphne, any final thoughts on your end?
All good on my end. So excited to have had you, Brandon.
Thank you so much for having me. I really had a good time with you guys.
We did.
Absolutely. So for more information, everyone, visit the studentloanpodcast.com, episode 38. That's the studentloanpodcast.com /episode 38.